A zesty old man and an unbeatable god fight to the death in this chapter of Kengan Omega. Without wasting any time, let's jump right in. After using Ryu to lure out Shen Wulong and following the altercation with Oma and his friends, Shen finally arrived at Gaoh's doorstep. Gaoh greeted Shen, remarking that it had been 80 years since they last met. However, Shen immediately demanded that Gaoh return his clone. Gaoh, unfazed, called him a nitwit and said he was too late. He revealed that he had gotten rid of the clone a long time ago. Shen, however, accused him of lying. Gaoh, confused by Shen's accusation, asked for clarification, but Shen continued, saying this behavior didn't match the man he remembered. He asserted that Gaoh would never dispose of a bargaining chip without reason, as he would use any means at his disposal to survive. Shen reminded Gaoh of how he had once used his comrades as shields to save himself. Though critical, Shen admitted he was impressed by Gaoh's strong will to live. Gaoh laughed at this, teasing Shen by jokingly singing that he must really like him. Strapping gauntlets to his hands, Gaoh mockingly proclaimed himself the fraudulent founder of a phony martial art. Yet, he showed no shame in being a fraud, stating that the only thing that mattered now was killing Shen Wulong. Seeing Gaoh's indifference to being called fake, Shen calmly replied that Gaoh would die as one. Shen then asked Gaoh if he had ever heard of the Gaia hypothesis. Gaoh scoffed, saying it was a crackpot theory from some NASA researcher, the one that proposed the Earth as a single, giant organism. Shen confirmed that this was indeed the theory he was referencing, and elaborated that the Earth, as a single life form, creates ecosystems through interactions with all life on it. He then declared that, while he believed the Gaia hypothesis isn't entirely bogus, he saw himself as the Earth's immune system. Right now, he claimed, the Earth was ordering him to kill Gaoh. Preparing to strike, Gaoh dismissed Shen's words, thinking he must be insane to believe such nonsense. He launched himself at Shen, using his Gaoh-style fanged beast technique. To his shock, Shen effortlessly dodged the attack. Undeterred, Gaoh repositioned his gauntlets against a wooden door, slamming it forward while simultaneously hurling a fist and scattering pellets at Shen. Yet, Shen dodged this assault just as effortlessly. However, Gaoh ditched his gauntlet mid-strike, revealing a hidden blade concealed within it. He attempted to stab Shen in the face, but Shen easily dodged the attack and countered by stabbing Gaoh with just a single finger, forcing him to back off. Shen complimented Gaoh's strategy, noting that the gauntlets Gaoh had been flaunting were merely a bluff. Gaoh's true plan had been to finish him off with the concealed blade. Shen admitted that Gaoh was strong, and speculated that only a handful of people might be able to defeat him. He thinks Yen might be able to it, but Yen, humorously interjecting in his inner thoughts, tells Shen not to use him as a benchmark. Gaoh retreated into his house, but Shen called out to him, saying he wasn't finished with his compliments. He praised the punch Gaoh had thrown, noting that he had successfully drawn his attention with the gauntlets, while throwing pellets strong enough to kill a man, if they landed correctly. Shen also noted that splintering the wall to temporarily blind him was a clever move. Personally, Shen added, he would have mixed a few iron pellets with the splinters for added lethality. If those had landed on him, then that would have been a few free hits. Frustrated, and deep in thought, Gaoh tells Shen to stop talking about what could have landed because, ultimately, everything had missed. The pellets missed, Fanged Beast missed, and even his stab, which by all rights should have hit, but missed as well. None of his attacks could even reach Shen, who had countered him with ease, despite his best efforts. This situation reminded Gaoh of the past, of the time when he and his comrades couldn't lay a single scratch on Shen. Their attacks seemed doomed to fail, as if they were never meant to hit him in the first place. Reflecting on this, Gaoh concluded that Shen's abilities went far beyond mere pre-initiative. Shen was simply on another level. Resigned, Gaoh admitted aloud through a speaker that Shen is still a monster in this generation, and could never hope to match him in a frontal assault. Shen notices the speakers that had been set up all around the house, and wonders if Gaoh is trying to confuse him. In response, Shen exposed Gaoh's strategy for what it truly was, a facade of martial arts, while relying on hidden weapons, misdirection, and scheming. Shen's tone remained calm, but piercing as he revealed Gaoh's tactics of ducking, hiding, and sneaking around to gain an advantage. By doing all of this, Shen knew Gaoh had prepared for him. He admired Gaoh's tenacity as he opened the door. Suddenly, a blade pierced through the door as Gaoh drove a spear toward Shen, aiming to impale him. However, Gaoh noticed something was off, as it is revealed that Shen had stopped both Gaoh and the spear with just one hand. Shen was aware that Gaoh should be past his physical prime, so he assumed Gaoh must be doping to compensate for his declining muscles and reflexes. Shen was even surprised that Gaoh was still alive at his age. Gaoh, however, was confused as to how he was being stopped so easily, despite having more brute strength now than in his youth. But all that strength was useless, because Shen wasn't even budging an inch. Gaoh, bewildered, remarked that his raw power was off the charts and wondered aloud if Shen had Superman syndrome. Knowing exactly what Gaoh might be thinking, Shen clarified that he didn't have Superman syndrome. He explained that it wasn't about raw power, it was about technique. Or, as Shen preferred to call it, principles, which he found to be a more fitting term. He explained that all he was doing was holding down the point of the force. Anyone could do this if they understood how it worked. Gaoh, however, doubted anyone could learn such a technique. Shen admits that he had misunderstood him and acknowledges that Gaoh had been bettering himself. With a swift motion, he snapped the spear in two. He admitted that he hadn't stopped an attack in a long time, but he suddenly changed his mind and decided to give Gaoh the chance to kill him. Weird snapping noises could be heard from Shen's body, which left Gaoh taken aback. He could feel Shen becoming more and more dangerous, and he questioned the significance of the chance Shen had just given him. Shen, now finished with manipulating his own body, revealed to Gaoh that he had intentionally relocated his tendons and suppressed his muscle power output. He had also limited his joints' range of motion, reduced his neural transmission speed to its lowest, and shut down some of his brain circuits. Shen had massively handicapped himself, just so they could at least enjoy the moment. Immediately, Shen struck Gaoh, landing a clean hit that knocked the old man back. He didn't let Gaoh recover, blitzing across the space to appear behind him. Gaoh tried to counter, but was instead met with a punch to the face. Shen told Gaoh he was slow, noting that his body was moving sluggishly, and asks if this was the result of his senses at work, because if that was the case, they must be a real handicap. Not willing to give up, Gaoh ripped a piece of the floor from the ground and slammed it into Shen. Gaoh then grabs the metal and attempts to crush Shen. He slams Shen to the floor and begins using his Nico-style adamantine kata, iron breaker, landing powerful blows on Shen. But this doesn't last long, as Shen uses his legs to throw Gaoh off of him, sending him into the ceiling, then crashing into the floor. Shen gets back on his feet, impressed by Gaoh's fighting, wiping the blood from his cheek. He then asks Gaoh if he wants to go for another round, or if they should end the battle. Gaoh lies on the floor, in disbelief that it only took 3 hits to leave him groggy. He acknowledges that he knows Shen wasn't lying, seeing just how strong Shen is, even while hampering his own power. This must mean Shen's full power is so tremendous that Gaoh can't even fathom its danger. Grinning, Gaoh calls himself lucky that Shen came within his reach. As Gaoh gets back on his feet, Shen deduces he wants to try again. But Shen finds himself puzzled by Gaoh. He senses an exceptional hatred coming from Gaoh and asks if he really hates his former self so much for killing his comrades in Wulong. Weren't those comrades strangers to Gaoh, he asks. But Gaoh replies that he isn't angry about that and tells Shen to dig a little deeper into his memories. Shen then digs deeper into his memories and finally remembers he was that boy. The scene shifts back 85 years into the past in China, to the day Gaoh's vendetta against Shen Wulong began. At this time, Shen was the leader of the 3 groups, the Worm, the Westward faction, and a 3rd group, the Dragon Tribe. The Dragon Tribe, descendants of Long Men, a hero from the Kingdom of Chu during the spring and autumn period. Inside the Dragon Tribe's headquarters, Shen stood facing another warrior. He called out to his friend, saying they shared the name of the dragon, and demanded to know why the man was betraying him. The man replied that it was a friend's duty to correct his friend's errors. Shen, confused, asked the man about the error he was making. The man, whose real name was Long Yi, pointed to his research, which was being conducted through the worm, and explained that he could accept Shen as his reincarnation through Huisheng. However, Long Yi had a problem with Shen's cloning research, calling it a violation of the natural order, something he believed was a bridge too far. Shen, puzzled, asked if he thought this was wrong, to which Long Yi explained that such actions violated the natural order and must not be allowed. Shen took a moment to consider the man's argument but could not see anything wrong with his methods. Long Yi, laughing, assumed Shen didn't understand the natural order. Trying to avoid a fight, Shen asked Long Yi to put down his fists, explaining that he was quite fond of him. He then pointed out that all of Long Yi's clan warriors were dead, and asked if Long Yi didn't have a prayer left. Long Yi replied that he would not be called a coward by Shen. He had seen firsthand that the combined might of the dragon warriors could not match Shen's strength, but insisted there was no retreat for a defeated general. Long Yi then urged Shen to come at him, but Shen told him to strike first. As Long Yi prepared to attack, the sound of cracking from his hand was heard as he rushed in. Unfortunately for him, he was quickly taken down by just a few strikes from Shen. Surprisingly, Long Yi managed to land a blow on Shen, impressing him, as he hadn't suffered a wound in a long time. Shen then noticed someone standing behind him. He turned to the boy, and told him he didn't blame him for refusing to fight, as it had been the right decision. Shen added that if the boy challenged him now, he would certainly die, but he could see the boy had potential. Shen instructed the boy, whose real name was Long Xiu, to come back and challenge him when he was ready. This boy, named Long Xiu, would later come to be known as Gaoh Mukaku. Shen finally remembers that Gaoh is Long Yi's grandson, and Gaoh feels honored that Shen remembers. Shen deduces that Gaoh must have hidden his identity to get close to him. He also wonders why Wulong swore fealty to him, only to turn against him later. Shen realizes that it was Mukaku who instigated everything. Not denying this, Gaoh admits that it was easy to manipulate those idiots. Shen comments that Long Yi was a good man, but he made one mistake, and that mistake was not killing Gaoh. Suddenly, Mukaku uses the Long clan's secret technique, the Dragon's Maw Fist. Shen blocks it easily, but Gaoh follows up with a knee strike that hits Shen, knocking him back. Annoyed, Shen calls him out for using the Gaoh, Nico, and now the Long clan style, remarking that it's old-fashioned for Gaoh to resort to such methods. Gaoh shouts at Shen, telling him to shut up, and declares that he would turn to the gods and demons if they could help him kill Shen. Shen suddenly falls to one knee, observing as Gaoh pulls something from beneath his mat. As Gaoh reveals a katana from his pouch, Shen comments that Gaoh is thorough, almost to the point of being honorable. Gaoh thanks him for the compliment and swings the katana, landing a cut on Shen. However, it's revealed that Shen caught the blade with a single hand. He tells Gaoh that he came close to killing him but, unfortunately for Gaoh, failed. Gaoh admits that Shen is right and lifts his fist in the air, deciding to try one more move to finish the job, the Nico-style adamantine kata, indestructible. He slams his fist onto the katana, aiming to puncture the blade into Shen's body. Above them, a pipe releases carbon monoxide, a colorless, tasteless, and odorless gas. When inhaled, it binds with hemoglobin, causing poisoning. At just a 1% concentration of carbon monoxide, death can occur in 1 to 3 minutes. Mukaku had been pumping carbon monoxide through pipes in the ceiling, mixing it with the air conditioning. He set up multiple zones, keeping himself in a safe zone while luring Shen into the danger zone. The katana drips with blood, revealing that Shen had stopped the blade from slicing into him by gripping it insanely hard, shocking Gaoh. Bored, Shen remarks that it's just one thing after another with Gaoh but admires his crude efforts. Confused, Gaoh wonders how Shen is still moving when he should have already been knocked out by the toxic gas. Seeing the confusion on Gaoh's face, Shen gives him a hint as to why he isn't affected by the gas. He asks Gaoh to remember his former self, the one Gaoh first met and the one who killed his clan, and the one before that. Gaoh finally realizes that Shen isn't breathing. Shen explains that all living beings age with every breath, so his predecessors taught him that to slow the aging process, they simply had to stop breathing. This led them to develop the ancient art of yogic breathing. While they couldn't achieve total breathlessness, it was enough to slow their aging. Shen then asks Gaoh how old he thinks he is. With a swift motion, Shen forces Gaoh down by shifting the katana and insults him, calling his futile attempts asinine as he kicks Gaoh in the face. Gaoh is knocked back and loses his grip on the katana. Panicking, he realizes he must escape, but Shen drives the katana through Gaoh's chest. Shen reminds him that he had lost interest and has now grown tired of him. Gaoh, desperate in his final moments, asks Shen if he truly wants to kill him, because if Gaoh dies, Ryuki dies too. He reveals that he is the only one who knows where Ryuki is and asks Shen if he's just going to let his clone die. Shen, however, tells Gaoh to drop the act. He's already received witness reports about Ryuki's whereabouts while Mukaku was sneaking around, so there's no reason for concern. With his back against the wall, Gaoh tries to think of a way out. He decides to distract Shen and buy himself some time. Gaoh asks Shen why he's so obsessed with Ryuki. Isn't Oma Takeda a clone of him as well? Why does it have to be Ryuki? Shen ponders the question, acknowledging it's a good one, but he decides not to answer. It would make Yen angry. However, since he's already going to kill Mukaku, Shen changes his mind and decides to respond. He reveals that Oma Takeda is not him. Gaoh, still in disbelief, tries to understand how this could be possible, since both Oma and Ryuki look very much alike. Shen smiles, telling Gaoh that he should have figured it out by now. Now it's time for him to die. Gaoh, still in disbelief, tries to understand how this could be possible, questioning how there could be more than one. Shen drives the katana through Gaoh's body, slicing him in half. As Gaoh takes his dying breath, he asks one final question: who is Shen? Shen recalls that Gaoh was the only person to make 3 attempts on his life. Unfortunately for Gaoh, the third time wasn't the charm. As Ryuki leaves his former grandfather's house, memories flood his mind. He remembers a conversation between them both. Ryuki once asked Gaoh why he hated the worm so much. Mukaku confessed that he didn't really have a reason, it was all made up. Ryuki pressed him, asking what he truly meant by that. Gaoh then explained that there was someone in the worm he needed to kill. His brothers and pupils had been killed by this person, but Gaoh didn't think of himself as a hero for trying to avenge them. He continued, saying that the people who had been killed had every reason to hate him for seeking vengeance, but if he didn't achieve his goal, they would have died for nothing. He reminds Ryuki that he better not try to die, because if he doesn't achieve his goal, then he would be the one to take over from him. Mukaku then told Ryuki that he had to become stronger. He couldn't afford to die. Ryuki, observing his grandfather's age, joked that Gaoh could drop dead at any moment. Gaoh, frustrated, shouted at Ryuki for missing the point and not understanding the context. He urged Ryuki to learn to read between the lines. Now, in the present, Ryuki wonders if Gaoh was being honest that night, and whether he truly meant what he said. But Ryuki remains uncertain. Why did Gaoh Mukaku choose to spend his life fighting the connector? Was it for vengeance against the person who destroyed his clan? Or was it a craving for the title of the strongest? The truth remains a mystery. In the end, Gaoh Mukaku dies at the hands of the strongest. That's all for today, friends. If you enjoyed, please support my journey to 1,000 subscribers by hitting the subscribe button. Until then, have a nice day or night.